I'm Sarah Ping, Director of the Emerging Technologies Research Lab at Monash University here in Melbourne. And today I'm here with Karen Waltorp, our visitor from Aarhus University in Denmark. And we're here to talk about Karen's new book, which has just been released, Why Muslim Women and Smartphones. So I'm absolutely delighted to at last hold this book and its material and reality in my hands here. And to have Karen here to talk to me about it. So you decided then to start a research project about Muslim women and smartphones based in Copenhagen.
Yes, it's definitely, well, there are different inspirations that have come together. There are sets of core arguments that relate to each other and relate to the form of the book, which is, it has two sides. So it's got twinned chapters, and the one set of chapters are really concerned with making ethnographic descriptions that hopefully transport the reader into this environment and into the lives of the women, into the apartments, into the very intimate situation, just you and a smartphone, and you in social media with others. So they are quite descriptive, and we kind of follow these women as they move from Copenhagen to Dubai, one to meet a suitor. Another two women we follow to Iran, where they visit with the family over the summer and stay with the family. And to kind of, instead of argue that these women cannot be reduced to one single stereotype, then instead show it through sharing some of the ethnography.
So as anthropologists, we really often pay a lot of attention to local concepts and to the concepts that are used as part of the everyday lives of the people who participate in our research. And I know that in your work there was a very particular concept, which was hakarat,
yes.
Which you've used throughout the project in really interesting ways, and it would be lovely to hear some more about that from you.
Yeah, so I didn't know the concept before, but it's an Arabic term, harakat, which means movement or motion, and it's used in local slang in various ways, but the connotation is that you do a trick on someone, but it can be everything from doing a trick on the police to kind of get an advantage through a cunning way to just, use your charm and get an advantage or kind of get out of a sticky situation. So harakat can be all of those things, and it was used a lot. And I realized that in their everyday lives, it's quite a saying term for how they need to navigate these different sets of expectations and norms and ideas around how they should act and what they should become. And they sometimes overlap, sometimes align, and sometimes they're quite contradictory, what the expectations are from family and local environment and from the Danish society, from peers, from possible future husbands, and even within different sides of the person, the woman themselves, there are sometimes things that are difficult to align in terms of how you want to live your life and build your future. And in all of these situations, harakat comes into play, and the smartphone plays into this in a really helpful way, full of affordances, I argue, for the young Muslim women that I worked with. And moreover, it then inspired the whole form of the book.
So they taught you harakat as well?
They taught me harakat as a tactic, and I'm trying it out as a tactic and a form.
And the book also transgresses some of the normal conventions of anthropology in its structure, doesn't it? Because you've actually structured the book in a novel way. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yes, so that grew out of, I think, me dialoguing with the different forms of material in the more analytical phase, and having a lot of feedback with the people involved in the project in that process also, and realizing that actually what I was trying to do was sharing a lot of insights from these women's lives, but without exposing them, concealing aspects or have layered meanings in whatever memes or messages or images they shared. In the same way, I've had to, in the book, invoke some things and conceal others, but allude to them. And I've tried to do that also by working in different modalities. So, you know, the images and the video and different kinds of text. So both the analytical discussions and the ethnographic descriptions.
So weaving in and out of the theoretical and the more ethnographic and the more descriptive, which I think you do in a really beautiful way in the book. And so you use all of those techniques to communicate to your readers.
I try to, in an effort to make accountable knowledge somehow, to all the time, you know, mirror it and reframe the questions. And for example, in part C of the book, where on the ethnographic and descriptive side that the questions are about hijab and desire and social control, then on the other side, the more methodological, epistemological part of the book, the question is also about, well, what is freedom and what is state control in this day and age, in the reality of these women in Denmark, and how do we even understand choice and freedom and dress and women's bodies and who should tell and save or not. I think it's a really strong argument in the book to relinquish control and let yourself be taken over by, well, both the people you work with and their plans and the ideas for you and what they use you for, what their aims and stakes are invested in the project, but also let yourself be taken over by the technology that you work in and through. So in our case, working with images has been like the core, but the technology through which we've communicated and worked with images has really changed, and therefore it has really changed how we work together. And I discussed that as through the prism of the cyborg, and talk a bit about cyborg ethics, also in audiovisual or multimodal anthropology, that everything we make together is also something that will eventually circulate and try to be aware and make part of your project the media ecology that we work in.
Well, that's also a wonderful rendition of what anthropological fieldwork can actually be. And it was essentially a very collaborative project, wasn't it?
It was. I think the whole start of the project was about doing together and making together as a form of research, a bit refigured, still drawing on the old core participant observation, but really adapted to how they were using phones and how we were making images and representation together.
And you were really making images together, weren't you? Because I know that as well as being an author, you are also an anthropological filmmaker, and that filmmaking or video making was a core part of your work.
It was a way of relating and making it very obvious to everyone involved that this was about us creating knowledge together for an audience to see. So as important as making images and getting to understand it was about what do we want to present to the world and what kind of images and stories would we like to circulate.
What do you think your kind of main takeaway and insight from the work is in terms of anthropological research and methodologies? What would you advise a young researcher just embarking on a similar project today?
That's such a good question. Different ideas. I think what I really took away was that I feel even more convinced that a lot of the more experimental, collaborative, multimodal approaches that I have made use of have sometimes been something that I had to defend and explain whether or how that's anthropology. And I feel so much more certain and would really like to share with all new anthropologists or students that what is core anthropological is really to experiment and to be rigorous, but not rigorous in the way that you repeat what has been done and what is now taken to be the standard methods and techniques, or even conceptual theoretical framework that you should kind of be in dialogue with and stick to, but rather think about how a lot of the classics that we read in anthropology and for example the Manchester school or the Chicago school, what they really did at the time was not a school that was taught then consequently in methods classes. It was really with the Manchester school, for example, reacting to a rapidly emerging technology, industrialization, urbanization in Africa, all of these changes happening, and finding out that, wow, our framework, our methods are just not adequate. And I think similarly now, the world is really changing in terms of emerging technologies and educational technologies in a way where making fieldwork without considering that digital dimension of most people's lives today is, I mean, I don't consider that core anthropology. I think we should really let the worlds we're in and the different modalities and registers that our informants experience that in and the way they live their lives, that should be what we take as our cue to develop the right approach, so a responsive approach. And I would say if you're a student of anthropology or related disciplines reading the book, I hope that you take away tips and ideas and considerations around accountable knowledge making, really questioning throughout why am I doing this? Why this question? Who's interested? Who will benefit from this knowledge? How will it play into different stories and images being circulated about this phenomenon or this group of people as it is? So I think there are a lot of methodological inspiration in the book that of course are at the same time epistemological. And then I think in the theoretical argument, which is somehow ethnographic, analytical, as we just talked about, is how this harakat is actually it's playing on the old anthropological distinction between tactics and strategies. So these women are a lot of the time acted on, and they don't necessarily get to make the strategies, but they make up these different tactics to kind of navigate in different ways. And I've used the term composite habitus to kind of explain how they try to do the best in every single situation while kind of finding a balance between all of these, like all eyes are on them. So the metaphor of seeing and the gaze and eyes is like weaved throughout the book. And in this situation, they know that some people will be quick to judge them as subdued Muslim women. And on the other hand, if they play out different sides of themselves, they might fall into the, oh, you're free and you have turned your back on Islam. So this wish to actually be seen as an independent woman, live up to your parents' expectations, the local community, the life that you wish to live, peers, all of that. I've tried to say that a composite habitus is kind of what you end up with in this subject position, where of course your home environment has formed you, and at the same time all of these women are of the second generation. So they've grown up in Denmark and they're Danish, they're Copenhageners, and when they go to visit their parents' home countries, doesn't matter if it's Iran or Pakistan or Jordan or which of the countries, they all share that they never feel as Danish as when they're
so living
in
their
those
lives
countries.
in a very complex global world.
Yes, and it's beyond this idea of hyphen identity, because it's not two wholes that are then put together in one. So the composite tries to build on Pierre Bourdieu's insights about the habitus, and at the same time draw in some of New Melanesian ethnography, notably with Marlon Strathern and Roy Wagner, and say we are composite of the important people in our lives, and we are so in a different way in this digital age.
So really bringing together the digital anthropology with the traditional anthropology of the past. So now the book's finished, published, finally out in the public domain. What do you think's next? What's the future? What does the future hold? How should we be participating in it?
Well, on a grander scale of that question, besides this project, I think that we have an obligation, or that we're invited as anthropologists to really contribute our knowledge, because we do make knowledge with people and grounded knowledge. And I think in this way we are creating the future.
Yes.
It is future making, and it is in this media ecology, as I spoke about earlier, it's really about circulating different narratives and images to some of the more one-sided.
And your work also has implications for policy, because it provides a really unprecedented kind of in-depth understanding of what it's like to live as a young Muslim woman in Copenhagen, which inevitably should be able to translate as insights for policymakers who, in terms of giving them a better understanding of the kind of worlds that they wish to have some kind of impact on. So what would you want the takeaway to be for policymakers in Denmark?
I would really hope that they understand this argument about a composite habitus, which kind of is born from a trans-contextual situation or condition, and that, well, to make it short, Gregory Bateson worked with this notion of the double bind, which goes into the notion of the habitus cleft, or the cleft habitus, which inspired the composite habitus. But the difference is that I kind of try to bring into the conversation Gregory Bateson's idea that it was not just pathological. The double bind was not about schizophrenic patients being caught in a trans-contextual condition. It's as much a dynamic that shows that on all scales, on all levels, if you're in this kind of double bind and you manage to break it or tactically navigate it, then a lot of creativity and innovation is born from that, and emerging new ways of acting. And I think that is completely overlooked, and I think that through Haircut and through their smartphones, this is what the women I work with demonstrate all of the time. But the way that policies is made about them, never in conversation with them.
So anthropology should have a role in actually helping to shape a different future, and a more equitable and a respectful future.
I think we should. I think that's part of accountable knowledge making. That we consider how our the stories, the knowledge we make, the images we make, if we work audiovisually, how they circulate, and the importance of that, and have that not as an after or an appendix, but as part of the whole knowledge-making practice.
The core work of anthropology then.
Exactly. We should look at both the emerging technologies and how they play out differently with different groups of people and different subject positions. And consider how to go on into these futures together and not shy away from it. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much. I think that the book is a fantastic moment to publish this book. Also in terms of the futures movement in anthropology, I think the book plays an important role in focusing that agenda. And Karen's work, along with the work of the future anthropology's movements, has a really, really powerful and strong role to play in that. So thank you very much, Karen.
Thank you.
Wishing you all the best for your future projects, and I'm sure that this work will have an enormous impact.
Hopefully. Thank you.
Thank you.